Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight for our Scouting for Ruffed Grouse Masterclass. Um, I went out last night so that I could feel like I could talk on this class, and I did get a ruffed grouse, the first one of the season, so I feel qualified. Not that I'm bragging, but it's open here in the West. I know in the Midwest where Ben is, we got a couple weeks. I know Michigan's always the 15th. Minnesota, Wisconsin are usually the Saturday closest to the 15th. So hopefully people are getting excited and getting ready if you're in one of those states that hasn't been open yet. We'll go through just a little bit of housekeeping here while people are still filtering in and getting situated. So your audio and video are turned off, so we can't see or hear you. So no worries if you have noise in the background. This class is being recorded. So if you do have to drop off early or you miss a part and you want to go rewatch something or send it to a buddy, we will email the recording to everybody tomorrow evening. You'll get an email with the YouTube link so that you can rewatch or watch a portion that you missed, stuff like that. If you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box down below, should be near the bottom of your screen. I see there's some people in the chat already. That's great. Chat is good just for letting us know, who you are, where you're from, if you've been out hunting, what you've been seeing already. But chat is not a good place for questions. They just get lost in there. It's hard for us to answer them and kind of filter through them. So use that Q&A feature. We can't guarantee we'll be able to answer every single question, but we'll do our best to answer as many as we can. So some of the kind of objectives for the class tonight, what we're going to cover. We had a lot of folks send in questions before the class, which was great. We're going to try to cover some of those topics. This is a class dedicated to scouting for ruffed grouse. So we're not going to talk about prairie grouse or duskies or sooties or things like that too much. It is going to be ruffed grouse specific. And primarily scouting for ruffed grouse, using the onX web map primarily to identify places to go hunt ruffed grouse. We will talk a little bit of in the field stuff. We're not going to talk a ton about, gear, dog training, stuff like that. Going to be primarily how to find where grouse are, from the comfort of your home. So we've brought our in-house upland expert in, Ben Bredigan, who is in central Minnesota, I guess you'd call your area. A lot of experience hunting ruffed grouse in multiple different states. So he's going to be kind of leading the spiel here. So Ben, how are things in the great Midwest?
I tell you what, I have the windows open and the weather is beautiful, and it couldn't come at a better time because I am fired up to get in the woods and go chase after roughies. And after this warm summer, it couldn't come soon enough. So everyone, at least in the Midwest here, should be jazzed with this weather we're having. Time to get out and run dogs and get tuned up for the season if you haven't already. So
I saw 101 on my car thermometer last night.
ooh,
So we
there
need a
are
cold
good,
front.
yeah, there are apparently good times to not be in Montana, and this might be one of them. So
We're getting a cold front tomorrow, they say, but I think it's bringing some smoke with it. So take the good with the bad.
yeah. Well, we will go ahead and kick things off here. Like Jack said, I'm Ben Bredigan. I do a fair amount of bird hunting. I grew up here in Minnesota and grew up hunting. I've had the chance to hunt grouse kind of across the country. And today we're going to kind of go through an approach I use really for a lot of species. You can apply this to pheasants. You can apply this to quail. It's a very similar system. It's just changes in what exactly I'm looking for. So, like Jack said, I'm gonna use the web map for the majority of this. Easier to see. I do personally all my scouting on the web map on my computer. If you have access to one, it's got a bigger screen, and I just find the usability a little bit easier when I'm in the field. Of course, I'm using the web map or of the Hunt app. You can also scout on your phone. It's just a little smaller. I find this to be a little bit more easy for this heavy duty scouting. So we're going to talk about how to find ruffed grouse. And we are going to talk about, I'm going to talk about the Midwest a lot, but I'm also going to touch on some East Coast states. I know there are a number of questions in there about, hey, my state doesn't have all of these great resources like a Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan maybe do. So we're going to be talking about some other ways I use the app to find grouse with the absence of some of these tools that'll help me point better in the right direction. So kicking things off, I'm going to share my screen with you guys right now. So looking at the web map here, if you're not familiar, the tools and functions, definitely go check out Jack's app 101s. Super powerful, will definitely enable you to be better at scouting, use in the field, etc. So what I'm going to do is kind of break down how I go about finding birds. Now, the first and most important thing is you have to go to where the birds are, because I could go down in central Nebraska here and grouse hunt until I'm blue in the face, and I'm probably not going to find many grouse. So we've got to go where they are. And there's a number of good resources to help us get in the ballpark just to even start. A lot of different states in the grouse range will provide different surveys. So this, for example, is the Minnesota. This is the drumming count, which comes out in the summer. And so drumming counts are a great tool. However, do not take them as the source of truth, because they are counting spring drumming, X amount of drums per stop. And that is not taking into account recruitment for young birds, broods, etc., that hatch in the spring. So that's something to take note. However, what this is going to do is give you a baseline at which to go off to help find birds. So we're looking at Minnesota here, for example. And what it's showing is kind of a map of how they delineate the units at which they track drumming. Obviously, the Northeast is a big part of it. You've got Northwest, Central Hardwoods, and the Southeast down here in the bottom right. So this is what the Minnesota DNR deems the grouse range. If I go and look at here, I can see drums per stop by year. This is the statewide population index right here. And then we go down, it's kind of hard to read, but essentially these are by different zones. So I believe this one is, if I go and look at here, so A is Northeast, B is Northwest, C is Central Hardwood. So if I'm going to Minnesota for the first time, I'm looking here and saying, okay, well, in 2026, I'm looking at about 2 drums per stop, which is indicating generally a higher density of birds in that area. I think B was the Northwest. Yeah, B was the Northwest, looking at about 2.5. C was the Central Hardwoods, down a little bit. That's 1. All right. And then this is the Southeast, which is sub 1. So just based off of this, I want to go where the birds are. So I'm looking at A or B, which would be either that Northeast or Northwest. And then and remember, you got to take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. Like, this is just how to help you get into an area. And a lot of the times, like, granted, this is the Northeast, that is a giant chunk of Minnesota where you're going to find birds. So there's a lot of room to play. I always tell people, for example, with the pheasant report, Pheasants Forever, or the Minnesota DNR puts out a report, lots of different states put it out, and there might be one little area that says, oh, this is a really good spot, the birds are great here. Well, what do you think everyone's going to do? They are going to go to the highest density area of pheasants, and all of a sudden you and 1,000 of your closest hunting buddies are going to be in the same area. So kind of take this with a grain of salt. And the DNR, depending on by states, put it out, like Wisconsin, for example. Let me see here. They break this apart by like the central priority, the northern priority, the driftless, which would be like Southeast Minnesota. So again, I'm looking northern Wisconsin, 2.3 versus 0.46, 0.09. Again, I'm just trying to get in that area. So we'll go back to the web map here and say, hey, we are going to be targeting this relative area. I'm just using the area shape just to kind of outline what I'm looking at. Okay, I'm looking to go hunt this area, which is a massive area. Okay, we're here. What's the next step? And this, again, this system can be used pheasants, quail, etc. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to look at big population centers. And thankfully, Minnesota, northern Minnesota is kind of blessed by geography because there's not a tremendous amount of a large population up here. But what I want to do is kind of avoid, for the most part, some of the main areas. So Duluth, for example, that's going to be a big population hub. Grand Rapids is a popular area. But then you start looking up here and it's like, oh man, there is nothing up here. Hey, that might be a good spot to look. So really from there, I'm just starting to just zoom in on the web map and start looking for individual spots. Now, from here, this is where the power of the onX Hunt app really comes in. And I'll show you some of the different layers, some of the different tools to help bring this map to life and really help you understand where you can better go and find birds. So if you go into your map layers, which if you're on web map, it is right there. And this is going to bring up the different layers we have at our disposal. So I'm going to have the government land layers on. I'm going to toggle that on and off so you can see where you can legally hunt. I would imagine the majority of you are likely hunting public ground. I also like to have on the private land layer. It doesn't get in the way, and it also helps me paint a better picture of what I'm looking at. Possible access is also a really, really nice feature. This is an area that you can potentially hunt. You definitely want to do your research and make sure you can hunt it. This is going to be very prevalent in the Northeast as well, especially Maine, northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, the UP. And for grouse, we're really looking at timber companies. A lot of these have agreements where they allow hunters to go out and chase birds on these properties. But you definitely want to check it out. Don't take this as gospel. So going back to layers here, you can see our different pieces of public land are color coded in different shades. So this one's green. We've got some reservation here in orange. I believe this is some state land, some county land. So all these different pieces are color coded, which makes it really easy. So those are three layers you definitely want to have on. I'm going to go into Minnesota's specific layers here. I don't need these hunt areas on for grouse, but what I do have, and each state is different, I've got a forest disturbance layer, and I've got this RGMA, the rough grouse management areas. You can see those are highlighted. Those are specifically managed for grouse, which for me, honestly, it's kind of a love-hate relationship because while it is managed great, these can also be a beacon for people to come and hunt. Each state, a lot of the states have their different version of this. So the forest disturbance is a great thing that the Minnesota DNR offers. I'll show you Wisconsin as well. It is essentially showing you timber harvest, and it will label the year. And if you've grouse hunted before, you know why this is so powerful. If you haven't grouse hunted before, forest disturbance, whether it's through logging, whether it's through fire, are successional drivers, which is going to promote a younger forest and create higher stem densities, which are critical for the survival and propagation of ruffed grouse. So a lot of the times in Minnesota, a lot of the places across the country, really in the grouse range, timber is going to be a big driver of that. So here in Minnesota, you can see these different cuts are labeled by different year classes, and we will get into more about what we're looking for. If I scroll over here to the Badger State, they've got a similar thing, which is the Wisconsin game bird layer. So I'll go to Wisconsin here, and you can see the Wisconsin game bird layer. And this is, it doesn't provide as much information because I don't know the year class it was cut, but generally pretty good indication that there are going to be grouse. A lot of the times it is tied to some sort of timber harvest. Included in that is woodcock areas, which I don't like as much. A lot of the times it will give you like just pure swamp areas. Like this, for example, is a pure swamp. That might not be a pure swamp, but generally It could be really not prime areas, but I will take that into consideration. And a lot of the times you're going to find woodcock in these grouse covers as well. So that's the Wisconsin game bird layer. Another one is the timber harvest layer, which I believe is Jack. Where is the timber harvest
It's in
layer?
the trees, crops, and soil folder.
There we go. So timber cuts right here. So this is going to give timber cuts really on U.S. Forest Service lands, generally over the last 15 years. So areas that, oh, you can see, like for example, this cut right here. This is the Minnesota Forest Disturbance, the green one. This one kind of pale with the year 2016 outlined here. That's going to be timber cuts. And the nice thing is that is not state specific. That is going to be across the board here. So, if you're looking into some other areas, that will show up as well. Now, there were a number of people from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania also has a timber harvest layer on here, which is super helpful again, because that the successional driver is super important. But these are just really good shortcuts to use when you're trying to find grouse. However, we will also talk about what other things you can use to find grouse if your state, for example, doesn't have these great resources. We'll talk about some aerial imagery here and talk about how I go in and find these specific covers that would be likely grouse hunts. So another thing I'll show you here is this is very critical for when I'm scouting. If you go in the base maps here, we've got a number of different ones. A lot of the times I'm going to be using the hybrid, which is going to show you these topo lines as well as the satellite imagery. I like to look at it this way because it helps paint a better picture of what is actually on the ground. And it just provides you more information. So in preparation for this class, I was really looking into some East Coast stuff. Minnesota, Wisconsin, we don't have a tremendous amount of topography. And when I was looking at areas that I thought potentially there was some disturbance there, whether it's through logging, turns out it happened to just be on hilltops that were more barren. So by using that hybrid, it really helps me paint that picture to know what I'm looking at, especially when it comes to the more areas with more terrain. Another cool one that I didn't use as much before, but I don't know if you guys have seen it now, but on our topo maps, we have LiDAR. And LiDAR is going to be very high definition topography. So if you toggle this on and off, you can see how much with the shading, how that really brings this map to life. And I found myself using this a tremendous amount with scouting just to understand low areas in relation to creek beds, waterways, etc. Out east, these hilltops. So we'll go through it and I'll show you how I utilize this in kind of my stepped approach, but I want to make sure that you guys understand this and see this. Another one is recent imagery, and recent imagery is going to be less detailed, but is going to be updated more frequently. So when I flip that on, you can see that the quality isn't quite as good, but what it is giving me is generally a 2-week window. So this photo here has been taken somewhere between August 18th and September 1st. And again, it is just helping you add different tools to your toolbox so you can better understand what you're looking at. And the cool thing about this is I can go and scroll way back in time and look at this through the year. So the nice thing, and this has saved me in the past, is I've went to a really good cover where I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a great spot. And turns out they harvested it that summer and that data wasn't available yet. So recent imagery is another tool to use. So,
and I do want to point out that the recent imagery is an elite only feature. So some folks, if you're not elite, you won't be able to turn that on. So you do have to have that elite membership to access that.
good call, Jack. Good call. All right. So now, Jack, am I missing? Oh, yes, I am missing some things. Some other cool features here that will help you really, regardless of where you're at. And I'm going to be showing them to you today as, or showing you as a part of scouting as well. If you go into the trees, crops, and soil folder, there's a number of great things. We talked about wildfire as a successional driver. That's great. It's going to show you, this is historic wildfire, so things that have burnt in the past. It's going to give you year class. So this is the Camp House fire, the Jenkins Creek that happened in 25. But also you can go back and find older fires. And you're finding them in the right year class that is going to make for suitable habitat for grouse. Really, once this is some of the cool stuff. If you are an area that has aspens, regardless of the ownership, private, public, this is going to give you a general indication of what is growing in that area for tree. And this is our young aspen. It's going to show you roughly aspen, birch, and poplar that are in that 5 to 15 year class. And it's not perfect, but I use it as a great indicator to get me in the right area. I believe they're 20 or 30 square meters that they are sampled on right here. But again, this is just pointing me in the right direction. And it's also going to help me proof, especially in the Great Lakes area here. If I see a timber cut, I can actually look and see, okay, this was aspen, because again, I've been burnt by going to like a 2012 timber cut, and it happened to be pines, and pines aren't as desirable as maybe an aspen. The other thing to help me paint this picture as we get down, I'm going to use coniferous versus deciduous, and that is going to show me the delineation of pine here in brown and deciduous here in red. So that's another tool I use. Out on the east side in the Great Lakes to hear this acorn producing oaks layer. And if I actually go in and dial into like this deciduous tree distribution, you can see, you can filter by all of these different types. So if I turn on oak hickory, I'm looking for, let's just say like an area with oaks in it. A lot of the times out east, that is going to be a very primary food source for a lot of grouse. So now I'm seeing large swaths of timber that are obviously, this is indicating that this is oak or hickory. So another layer I use, great for you guys out east. That really kind of rounds out the tools I use in terms of layers. And once I get my map set up, it's time to party. It's time to start digging in and figuring out where I want to grouse hunt. So again, back to my areas. I'm avoiding kind of these metropolitan areas because a lot of the, or small metro areas, I guess you could call it, because a lot of people can just go out for day trips to these areas. And generally it's going to get harder hit, where for the most part, you start to get in some of this remote stuff up here, not a lot of towns. Generally that is going to be hit there. You're going to see less pressure. And I know obviously for you East Coast folks, pressure in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan is pretty relative, because we do have the blessing of having a tremendous amount of public land to grouse hunt over here. So kind of digging in now, what I'm going to start doing is I am going to look for big areas of public land that I can hunt. And again, there is a tremendous amount of public land up here to look at. So I'm just going to start perusing. And this was earlier today. I just picked a random area, not trying to hotspot. I've never been here before. I don't know if there's birds here, but this was just an example I use. So you can see, obviously, there is a lot of public land between the state land, the state forest. There's a bunch of public land. And the nice thing about this too is because it is different land ownership. So different entities manage their land different. The state is going to manage it differently than the county. The county is going to manage it differently than a national forest. So it's great to have all these different land ownerships, because let's just say I mark all this stuff on national forest and I get there and I realize like, oh man, this is all old growth forest. I'm not seeing a lot here. Well, the nice thing is I can go sneak over to county land or to state land, and their land management practices might be different. And you're going to have a better chance of getting into birds in a close proximity versus having to drive 2, 3, 4 hours, waste a half a day going to a new area. because there's not much for birds there. So once I kind of hone in on an area that has this concentration of public lands, and it could be vast. Like again, there's just a tremendous amount here. I'm going to show you how I do it, kind of the quick way of doing it with the timber harvest layers, the forest disturbance layers, and then I'll show you how I do it if I didn't have those tools at my disposal. So generally, so it really depends on where you are at, but generally you are looking for timber cuts in that 2005 to 2015, 16 area. And obviously these grow at different rates depending on the soil type. You could have a 2006 cut that's sitting head high, that's super sparse, or you could have a 2020 cut that's perfect cover. So this is just a rule of thumb, and it's kind of how I go about doing business here. So kind of narrowing in on an area, what I am truly looking for. So I am looking for forest disturbance in that, again, that 2005 to 2015, 17 area. And I'm looking for a mosaic of cover. That is so important for not only grouse, but for pheasants, quail, all of that thing, all of those species. So I'm looking for not only differing cuts. So I have a 2012 cut here. I have a 2009 cut here. I have a 13 here. Rough grouse generally don't have that big of a home range, roughly around 40 acres, give or take, depending. So the great thing about that is they're going to stick to an area generally, and they like to have a bunch of different food sources, areas of cover right within that close proximity. So when I'm going out and scouting, I am trying to find those things tightly packed together. So this is a prime example right here. You can see I have a 2009 cut, 12. I've got swamp here, and I'm looking for these edges. So the nice thing about a swamp, if you think about it, it is an edge. I'm going to get more light penetration coming in from here, which means I'm going to have likely thicker growth. It's by nature of being closer to this waterway, it's going to have more moisture. It's going to have different growth in here. So again, this is an edge. I've got a trail working through here. Again, a lot of people walk trails, and they do it for a good reason, because these form edges. You're going to get different food sources that are growing on these trails. So again, I'm finding all these little nooks, crannies. And as I go down and start analyzing the satellite imagery, this is a really important thing that I can't stress enough. People that are become good at e-scouting for whatever species, insert here, is they are able to understand how to look at satellite imagery and understand what that is going to be like in person on the ground. And kind of the way I tell people, like how I went about learning it, is just you've got to be very intentional about it. So when I'm driving, for example, I will have onX Hunt up on CarPlay if you have it. Otherwise, I will have my phone. Disclaimer, don't drive safely. I'm not trying to tell you to do anything illegal here, but as I'm driving through the woods, I am constantly looking at my CarPlay and looking at the aerial imagery, and then looking at it in person. Like if I see something like a good stand of aspen or a good looking area, I go and look at that on CarPlay. It's like, okay, in my mind, I'm connecting those dots. So kind of a cheat sheet here for grouse is generally the smoother it looks, the younger it's going to be. So I am looking at over here, this is going to be older trees. And the way I know that is I'm looking at these crowns of the canopy. So there's an individual crown here. There's an individual crown here. And if you want to go a step further, I can go into my line distance tool and I'll measure that. So across here, that's like 12 yards. That's going to be a big tree. So that is obviously indicating that it's likely going to be an older stand of timber. And again, it's choppier, where if I look in here in this cut, you can see it's almost got a more smooth look. It's hard to pick out the individual trees in this canopy. Um, so that, again, if I look at this 13 cut here, good indication, it's a lot smoother looking than something like this area here, which is going to be older growth. So whether I have these tools at my disposal or not, I'm going to go and peruse satellite imagery. And by tools, I mean these disturbance layers. I'm going to go and peruse and find these areas that look smooth. So once I find kind of that mosaic of cover, those different cuts, I'm going to go and just apply some pressure to it a little bit. And that's where I'm going to use some of these other tools I talked to you about. So young aspen. If you're hunting an aspen area, I click on that. Okay, confirmed. Yep, this is an aspen cut. It's not a prime cut. And you're going to get sick of hearing me say a mosaic of cover, but I'm going to go back and hopefully here through this deciduous coniferous, I'm going to try to add as many elements into this small area as I possibly can. So you can see I have a little potential pine stand here, a little pine here, some here. So again, that's a good mix. That's what I'm looking for. I think that's how I'm going to go down here to this other spot I looked at. Mostly hardwoods here. I've got a little strip of pines up in here. So again, I'm trying to find all that stuff packed in as tight as possible to create those edges. So once I find those areas that look good, what I do is I'm just going to just quickly drop just a pin. And a lot of the times I'll drop this and I'll use the upland icon or an axis icon and I'll label it yellow. And these are just areas I need to go dig into and learn more. So I've got an area here I've got to check out more. And if I'm going to an area, I'll just go quickly and I might mark 20 different areas that I have to look into and check out more thoroughly. And what I mean more thoroughly is, okay, start thinking really critical of why a grouse would be here. Okay, we've got a swamp edge. We'll pull up that coniferous versus deciduous layer, and I'll really start ground truthing that. So, but here I'm seeing, okay, there's a 2012 cut, a 2018 cut. We've got a swamp right here. I'm just going to go and start hammering out pins. And kind of my system for labeling with pins is I will use yellow. Well, I'm going to tell you about how I wish I would have done it versus how I actually did it. So I ended up e-scouting a lot. I've got a lot more yellow pins is what I use in fault for e-scouting. What I wish I would have done is left them red because it's just more efficient. Whereas if I am in an area, I've hunted it, let's just say I shot a grouse right here, I use a different color. So I'm going to mark it blue. And I know, okay, hey, I shot a grouse here on 9-3. Where a lot of these times where I'm scouting, it's like, oh, I've got, now I wish I would have used red because again, just much more efficient to go through and knock out a bunch of red waypoints. And I know that with that red, I haven't been there. And when I'm in the field, oftentimes at the end of the day, I'm going to go through all my spots, clean up my waypoints. So I know what areas I've hunted, I'll leave notes, etc. So yeah. And what I'll do is I'll kind of show you a couple areas. And again, I've never hunted in this area, but just come along with me. I'll kind of show you how I would break this down. So attributes here, this is a great 13 cut. It borders this swamp right here. You've got access, which is important. I think you have access. Is this private land? So this is private land. So this is a private road. So that's a good thing. Like, all right, I just almost took for granted this is a private road. That's why I have that private property on. So it looks like I can potentially get through it from here looking at roads. But man, this gets a little sloppy back here. So I could have left a waypoint on here and then I got back, like started hunting and it's like, man, I can't even get back here. So that's another consideration. So I'm going to just keep perusing around the map here, looking at these cuts. Another thing here is looking I saw in the questions asking about sizes of cuts. Um, well, a lot of these will hold birds. Like this is a big cut here. This is 320 acres. Again, these grouse need those different food sources, different cover sources. If it's raining, they're going to gravitate towards pine, or in the later in the season, they need more of that thermal cover, whether that's pine, whether that's some of these grassy edges where grass is grown because there is more available sunlight, areas with thinner canopies where they get some grass for that thermal cover. So these big cuts right here, they can be really great for woodcock flights. I've found some just absolute bangers, and I've also found grouse in the middle of these, but generally I'm looking for these more craggy cuts with you know, little fingers and cuts kind of adjacent to each other. Again, just putting as much stuff as you possibly can into one area. So uh, I'm just going to keep perusing and seeing what we can find here. And it's nice here because I can see these different colors in association with each other. So like, this is interesting. 13 bordering a swamp, 10 bordering a swamp, 19, 13. Okay, I like this. Next thing I'm going to go is look at access. And I can see here, there is a logging road. I'm going to put in a waypoint here, just delineating like, hey, I can access this spot here. I'm going to go in and then just leave some quickly leave some little nuggets on areas I would want to potentially hit. So we've got a nice edge here, and I'm guessing this is probably this is likely going to be pines just from looking at the satellite image, but we can go in and we can go in and check that out. We'll turn on this coniferous versus yeah, I don't know if I believe that, but anyways, it's indicating some conifers in here, but that good little mix. So what I'm gonna do is say, all right, I for sure want to get back in this corner. I've got this 13 cut right here, bordering by this 19 with a swamp. Okay, I'm gonna send a waypoint there because that looks like it would. I'm going back to my yellow scheme, should be red. But that's an area I want to hit. These little points, see how this kind of feathers out? There's going to be more grass in here later in the season. You've got that thermal cover. You're going to get tag alders a lot of the time on these swamp edges, which is a very important food source for grouse. So I'll leave these little waypoints on areas I want to hit. A lot of questions about hunters that don't have dogs. And it's even more important for you guys to put yourself in these right areas. Because without a dog, you know, I've got the luxury of I can walk on a trail and my dogs might be 100, 150 yards in the cover, covering ground at 15 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour. They're going to cover a lot of ground. You hunters without dogs, you've got to be very intentional about putting yourself in the most prime areas. Otherwise, you could spend a long time walking without seeing birds. So there is nothing wrong with walking trails. Again, they're going to provide different food sources. They're going to provide clover. A lot of those times you can see these are open to sunlight. So you're going to get different types of growth along these trails. And for, again, hunters without dogs, that's going to give you better shot opportunities. So like I'm looking back here, I've got this great swamp edge here bordering this 2013-19 cut. I want to get back here. So that's what I'm going to do. And just go and mark up these areas. Then a lot of the times what I'll do is I'll leave an area that I want to park. So as I'm driving into these areas when I'm hunting, I might stop short of where I think I should. But also, you know, if there's any fishermen out here, I would be consider what would be a power fisherman. I like to cover ground fast. Sure, there might be a grouse somewhere in here, but odds are I've got a better chance in here. So I'm going to turn and burn, hit spots, hit prime areas, and keep moving. So Well, just looking at it from here, I'm probably going to say, oh, this looks like maybe a good area to park right here. I'm going to leave parking icon, and again, it's really important to label these icons or label these waypoints with icons, because all of a sudden, if I e-scout, I might be e-scouting in June just because I got the itch to go hunt grouse, and all of a sudden I get here and there's an X here, there's an X here, there's an X here, there's an X here. It's like, do I park here? I know I should probably access here. What did I mean by this? So by labeling these pins, it allows you to better um, understand what you did, and when you get to a spot, uh, understand what you meant and what you mean, and quickly hit these areas. So that's kind of a quick and dirty breakdown of how I do it with some of these layers, these disturbance layers. Similar thing with the Wisconsin stuff. I'll show you for you Wisconsin guys. I'm looking for these grouse areas that are abutting swamps. Again, these woodcock areas. Okay, these are all creating edges right here. I'm not looking for these massive cuts necessarily, but you see these little fingers like right here. This is going to be gold. I'm going to turn on topo and look at LiDAR. I can see these little depressions that are going to be holding, a lot of the times they're going to be holding water. I'm going to take it into 3D here and add a little exaggeration just so you can get a better understanding of like low areas. So if I can find low areas in these cuts, that's even better, because again, that's where water is going to pool. You're going to get different sources. Water is going to run off here. It's going to run off this hill. It's going to sit in the saddle. Just finding all those little micro covers is really, really helpful, and helps you definitely be more successful. So let me find a better example. Like I think this is good. Yeah, this is going to be a low area here. You can even see there might be a little creek bed running in here. I'm going to toggle on hybrid. Yeah, probably likely a low area running right in here. That's going to be a jam up grouse spot. Look at that. I mean, there is a cut right in between these two marshy areas, lowland areas, all the way out on this point. Like this is going to be likely, like I would bet a lot of money that I could find a grouse right here. So that's what I'm looking at in Wisconsin. And again, I don't want to forget about you Northeast people who might not have these tools at your disposal. So we're going to go over to PA. This is just areas I went and quickly marked. And really, you can use a lot of these principles I was telling you about when I was looking for stuff in Minnesota, Wisconsin. It's first and foremost, it's finding stem density. You've got to find that the correct age class, which generally is going to be about the size of your wrist, maybe a little bit bigger, maybe down to the size of a dowel, about that big, inch, 2 inches. That's going to be key for finding it. Swamp edges are, again, they're not going to be any different than we talked about in the Midwest. Granted, the species are likely going to be different, but you're still getting that different food source from different light penetrations rates, different moisture levels. So if I zoom out here, again, I'm using PAs, their cuts data here, but I think I had this turned off when I was scouting it, and actually I ended up finding them. But again, this is when you're relying on aerial imagery. I'm going to just shut this off for the sake of showing you, in case you might be in Maine or New Hampshire or somewhere that doesn't have this. But you can clearly see here that there is a difference, right? You see all these skidder roads in this. This was likely, I'm guessing, a thinning, because you still see some larger canopies. Like I'm looking at shadows here. You can see the tree trunk. I can see the shadow. Must have been a shot in the morning, because all the shadows are facing are heading west here. But this is probably a thinning. So as I'm looking at this, I've got access going right into the middle. And so I've got this 3D exaggeration on here. I'm going to trim this down because we've got a little bit more topography. I don't quite need that. So that's going to be a high point. You know, personally, I'm gonna be like as I target and hone in on this area, let's just say I park up here. Again, you're looking at these edges. I've got this, which was obviously not logged. That's an area I'm gonna look at and just say, hey, I want to walk around this. I'm gonna go put a waypoint in here, mark this, save that. Um, and keep going around here and finding those areas. So this particular spot doesn't necessarily have a lowland component. We've got a little, that's not a stream, that's just a boundary, I think. You can see the streams show up a lot better if you turn on topo. You can see these squiggly blue lines here denoting waterways, whether it's seasonal or obviously here, this is going to be likely a larger source. So that's another way to start is I'm going to look along these waterways. I'm going to turn back on hybrid here. Okay, this is coming up. Okay, it's along that road. Yeah, I might be getting a little close. I don't like that as much, but as I'm going to come up here, again, I'm seeing open area, bring more light penetration. Yeah, that looks like an area I'm going to hunt. And again, I'll just kind of keep perusing around. I marked some spots just for the sake of going faster here, but again, this is a cut. I can see all these roads. You can even see downed logs in the satellite imagery. So this is obviously a sign of logging. I think what I marked down here is you can see these little runs here. So, okay, I marked, there's an edge right here with this older growth forest. There is a low spot here. Those all look like good areas to hunt. I'm gonna go just again, keep perusing. Like you can see here, this is on top of a hillside. This up here, little tighter stem density than say here. This obviously transitions to some bigger trees, just judging by that canopy height. So that's a way I go about in these areas without some of those better tools to find some of these good areas, areas that might hold more grouse. Here's an area, again, it kind of looks like, yep, out on a point here, but close by here is this water area. These little runs in here, again, they're going to have that different habitat associated with it. So that's how I would go about it doing it in these areas. It's going to be it's going to be more difficult. You don't have that plug and play, easy, like, hey, go here. But it's honestly, it's not that hard. And once you start doing it, you get on the ground, you check those things, it makes it a lot easier. And if there's any grouse hunters, people that, if you've been out grouse hunting before, go find your favorite cover, an area that you shot grouse. Let's just say, for example, oh man, I know I shot a grouse here last year. Well, start to think about why there were grouse there. Okay, I've got this clearing here. I look over here again. Oh, remember when Ben said that smoother looking area? Well, we've got some of this, which is obviously going to be a higher stem density, a younger age tree. I've got some mature forest, and look at this. They must have cleared this at some point because I see again more of that younger cover through here. So really think about why there was a bird there and then go and replicate that. Go and try to find something that looks similar to this in that landscape. So as I'm cruising around here, oh man, I've got an edge that I've got that thinner area. Oh, I've got an opening here. And this looks like it was fairly new. I'm going to go and flip on my recent imagery quick. Oh, great. Look at this. They logged this at some point in time. You can see like that is obviously a change. You look at the color, generally the thicker the cover, the darker it's going to be in the actual coloration on the map. The lighter it is, the thinner the cover. So I'm looking here is like, this is like that brown. This along this creek is going to be darker green. Okay, they just logged that. That's interesting. Let's go back here and see. This was in let's go look in June. Oh, so likely this wasn't logged. And I can actually go back in the year and find when they logged this exactly using recent imagery. I'm going to keep going until I find this and then work back. But anyways, you can tell that these larger swaths have been logged. So I might set up shop, put another waypoint on here because again, that looked like this spot that I shot one last year. So just good things to keep in mind if you don't have those tools at your disposal. All right, well, it looks like in my tirade here we've racked up some questions. So if you want to answer some or ask some questions, be sure to put them in that Q&A function and we will get to them. Jack, did you find any by chance that looked interesting that we want to cover?
Yeah, there's a few. Here's one Dustin asked, do you change what you're looking for late season compared to early season? And maybe
Yeah,
define what late and early is.
that's a great question. Certainly, because again, food sources change from that early season where they are maybe focusing on grasshoppers, they're focusing on insects, clover, uh, those types of food sources. I'm going to be targeting, keying in on that. And what do those, a lot of times like clover, what does that need to survive? That needs access to sunlight. So that, and again, like we talked about trails are a great area where this stuff is going to grow up because it has sunlight on it. So those are things I'm going to be looking at. If it's dry early season, if it's warm, I'm going to be really looking for covers around wet areas because that is going to provide food sources. It's also going to provide insect growth from that moisture. So as we transition to mid-season, so I guess early season is what I mean, if it's getting, probably I would delineate that as before the first frost. Then when the frost comes, that is going to start killing, it's not going to kill all the green vegetation. But a lot of the times it's going to start killing insects. And then depending on your area, they are going to start switching to your hazel catkins, your aspen, lots of different berries, whether it's chokecherry, there's different types of berries all across the grouse range. So they're going to switch to more of that type of thing. And it's starting to get colder. I find in October, it's kind of like I don't know if it's an embarrassment of riches or it gets harder because a lot of the times, like there's lots of food sources. Some birds are keying in on green clovers, insects. Some birds are feeding on catkins. Some are feeding on berries. It really just depends. So that's a time frame that it can get like a crapshoot in terms of where they're going to be. Later in the year, I'm going to start looking at areas adjacent to thermal cover and whether that is pine trees. I'm going to flip on this the coniferous layer. I'm going to start to find those areas that are adjacent to pine trees, because if you've ever been in a 10-year-old cut after the leaves have fallen down, there's still going to be birds there, but it is very, very barren. Like you can see 50, 60, 70, 80 yards when in the middle of October, you could see 10 feet or 20 feet. So less protection from predators, less thermal cover. So I'm going to be looking at those areas where I might get an increase in grass. Like I have found some of my best areas on swamp edges where that kind of grass grows up into the woods. In November, if you're further south, you're likely, going more into December. So that's kind of how I would target different seasons. Another thing, if you are not a grouse hunter, if you haven't spent much time grouse hunting, if you happen to shoot one, definitely go look in its crop right, positioned right above the breastbone, like where you would breast a bird at. That's her crop. Go cut that open. And that has saved me on numerous trips. Where, for example, last year there was a time where they were just gorging on acorns, and I cut it open. There would be like 6 full-sized acorns in these gross crops. And then I turned on the acorn producing oak layer and the oak layer, and I went and just like a missile, one spot to one spot to one spot, and just targeting that main food source. Um, so food and cover are the main things that are going to drive a bird during the season. So again, just really stop and pay attention and think why those birds are there. If you find one, and be able to replicate that.
You beat me to it. I was going to mention opening the crop. I do the same thing, man.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're surprised. It's like they're eating that, like really.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's super interesting. And sometimes just I'm a bit of a nerd. I love science class when we got to dissect stuff, and it's
Yeah.
cool to see. Out in Western Montana, I shoot a lot of spruce grouse, partly because they hold really well for my dog. And you just open it up and it's just packed with spruce needles or fir needles. But every so often you find they're eating a bunch of berries or they're eating a bunch of insects or something.
Yeah.
Um,
One other thing is, depending on your area, I want to show you this. If you go on RGS AWS, I will look at if I'm trying to find an area to hunt for the first time. RGS is in AWS are doing a ton of work across the landscape. I just picked out an area here, kind of in there. I think this is the Mid Atlantic, um, and I can see areas that they are doing work on. So they're actively managing grouse in these areas. I'll go and read about them, find one that's close to me. Again, that is just going to, similar to what I said about using drumming counts, etc. This is at least going to get you in the right area, because oftentimes, and I won't say all the time, but they're managing grouse where grouse live. So this is a great resource to learn more about the area, um, and help get you in an area where you could be successful.
there was a question in here. We didn't really cover the West much. I can touch on it a bit here. Drake asked about northern Idaho. We don't really have. I'm in Missoula, Montana, so in about an hour I could be over Lolo Pass and into Idaho, or an hour and a half. So similar habitat. We don't really have a ton of aspens here. There's some. There's not a ton of diversity in the tree cover. It's kind of ponderosas, and then you get up into the spruce and the fir and the lodgepoles. Um, he was asking just what should I look for, and if you're hunting the West for ruffed grouse specifically, I don't know that I've shot very few birds more than a quarter mile from a creek bottom. I've gotten a few, but focus on the creek bottoms, not necessarily because ruffed grouse need water, but because that's where you're going to have thicker habitat. That's where you are going to have some maples or some aspens, some of the willows, just more of the brushy habitat, you know. I think of kind of, we've got 3 mountain grouse species out here. I think of blues or duskies kind of being up high, spruce grouse kind of more in the middle, definitely in spruce forests or firs, and roughies in the bottom. So my usual plan of attack for ruffed grouse in western Montana is look for creek bottoms that have, I love gated closed logging roads. There's there's a lot of creek bottoms that hold grouse, but I'm not walking them because I'm not rolling an ankle or, side hilling the whole way. So Drake, that would be my recommendation for kind of western ruffed grouse hunting. Do try to find some sort of habitat diversity. I've also had good luck in cedars. I don't necessarily know what they're using the cedars for. Maybe it's just good cover with those low hanging branches. But one of my absolute best grouse spots is along a creek bottom logging road. It's mostly pine and fir, but then we get into some cedars kind of where the creek where the two drainages come together, where you would come, a lot of the roads will come and make a U-turn over the creek. There's a bunch of cedars in there, and man, we're always putting up grouse. Don't always get good shots because it's thick cover in there. Um, and I guess my other tip for Western grouse hunting, and probably goes for everybody. I don't know if you've ever done this, Ben, but I spend a lot of time in the woods in the spring, and you can hear grouse drumming. I'm marking waypoints all spring when I hear them drumming, um, and then go back there in the fall because they're usually not too far away.
Yep, 100%. And I'll just kind of, again, this is an area that I have not been to. This is like a more of a Western look at what I would be looking for. As you look at, find these creek drainages here. This is again, LiDAR is huge out west. I can actually see the bottoms of the creek, where here it's hard to see actually how far across these are. So if I flip on LiDAR, I can actually see the width of these creeks, and it's like 40 yards across. So a lot of those times those birds are going to hang out down right in the bottoms of those creeks. And like Jack said, I'm looking for little changes in habitat, and looking at from aerial, looking at that, what that might be. So like here, I can see there's a lot of pines, but look at this right here. There's some more of this open ground that is adjacent to this creek, right? Just those little things that could tip you off that those birds might be in those areas. And Jack, what would you say generally? This might be a Montana thing, but generally roughies are going to be found lower than that 4,500 feet elevation. Obviously, it depends where you start at as well.
Yeah, it really depends, and I honestly don't necessarily pick an elevation number. It's really more of like, because in Missoula, the valley is about 3,200 versus Bozeman's closer to 5,000 feet. It's almost more like, where's your base? Where's the valley at? And then kind of that lower third of the mountain, give or take, is kind of how I think about it. Because you could go up, I think northwestern Montana, up by Libby, that area. I don't even know their elevation. They might be like 2,000 feet. That's one of the lowest parts in the state. So it's more so what kind of the base is versus, you get up along the divide by Butte, there's rough grouse, but you're at 7,000 feet, 6,000 feet. So really depends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if there's any more questions, we got a few minutes left. Feel free to throw them
Yeah,
in the chat.
there's a couple here just talking about early season heavy cover. you know, I grew up in Minnesota. We didn't really start thinking about grouse hunting until October, just because September 15th or whenever it opens, sometimes it's awful tropical and there's a lot of mosquitoes still, but it's tough shooting. But if you're getting out, do you change where you hunt, or do you try to, you know, pick different habitat knowing that all the leaves are up and all the grass is still up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I I don't really change my area. A lot of the times I'm just doing it for I know I'm not gonna likely get a shot. A lot of the times doing it for the dog work. So I just want to get my dogs into birds, whether that's, counting how many birds I hear flush. But let's just say I have a weekend in late September and the leaves are up, it's hot. I want to go out. That's my time frame to go out and shoot grouse. Um, I'm gonna try my darndest to pin those birds into areas where I can get a shot. And what I mean by that is I am going to walk edges, even if it's edges of like freshly cut timber that butt up to some older stuff. Um, while not generally they don't try to kill themselves, they try to put things in between you and them. But I have pushed them out into more open areas. I'll hunt along more mature edges where, hey, I might catch that bird out feeding on acorns it's out in that area. I'm gonna have a lot better shot opportunity. Logging roads, again, I no shame. I walk logging roads because birds relate to them, and that's going to give you a good shot opportunity. Same thing with edges of marshes, especially if it's a thin marsh where you can push them over across the marsh. If you have two guys, that's a great tactic. You set one guy on the marsh edge, one guy inside, and hopefully they will push them out across that open area. So it's just trying to get them to fly in a more open area. A lot of the times the birds are going to be in that thick area, and it might take 15, 20 birds before you see one. Kind of my rule of thumb is, uh, let's just say if you flush 10 of them, you might see 5 of them. Of that 5, you might get a shoot at 2 of them. Of that 2, you might shoot 1 of them. So uh, it's kind of the game when it comes to grouse hunting, which for me it's why I keep coming back. But yeah, those would be the tips I would have if you want to try to shoot more in the early season.
Yeah, there's a reason a lot of grouse hunters measure their days by their how many flushes they have. They're counting
Yeah,
flushes, not birds in the
exactly.
bag.
Yeah, yeah.
There was another one here and I just scrolled away from it. What about like does time of day matter to you at all? A, just when you hunt, or B, kind of natural movement of birds? Does that affect like, hey, I want to hunt this area in the morning or this area early afternoon or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm not going to claim to be there. There's people that have got this dialed down to a science way more than I do. So I'm not professing to be the expert here. Um, but what I have found is that let's just say it depends by the season as well. Early season, a lot of the times those birds are going to get out early. They're going to forage, then they're going to go back to areas that they're going to kind of loaf and hang around. And I find more success when birds are up and moving. They're laying down scent that my dog can then pick up. First thing in the morning, like right away at daybreak, it can be difficult because those birds have just kind of hung out and roosted all night. They haven't had time to go and lay scent. On the flip side of that, you are generally in the early season, you're going to have better scenting conditions. There's going to be more moisture. The dogs are going to be able to pick up better. So it's kind of that juxtaposition of scenting conditions when the birds are moving around. Generally, I won't get out. I don't start at daybreak very often. I'll let those birds get down, lay down some scent. My dogs have a better opportunity to pick up on them. That middle of the day, early season, it gets hot. If it's in the 70s, 80s, even, I'll generally take a break. And then those birds tend to be more active again at towards that end of the day. And in the later in the year, so kind of middle, I should hang up in the middle of the year, that perfect temperatures. A lot of the times they'll be hitting the feed bag all day. They'll be moving around. So I am running and gunning when those temperatures are right for the dogs. Later in the year, it really depends. A lot of the times I won't get out early. Um, but later in the day when everything warms up, those birds they have to eat. With those cold temperatures, they have to be on the ground moving, eating. Um, I'll definitely hunt the afternoon as that everything warms up, birds get moving around. So that would be my recommendation for time of day.
There was a couple of kind of related questions here. One gentleman talking about hunting the Turtle Mountains in North
Cool.
Dakota said forest intermixed with typical ag fields. Said, would you recommend staying in thicker cover or hunting the edge habitat? And then there was another question, kind of sticking on the ag theme,
Yeah.
asking if grouse eat grains, wheat, oats. I personally haven't heard of grouse utilizing ag fields. I think they'd be probably easy picking for avian predators there. But, talking Turtle Mountains, I mean, yes, grouse are creatures of the edge. I think Ben covered that, but I don't know that I would recommend hunting ag fields necessarily, but interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And again, not the expert here, but some areas in south central Wisconsin, or I guess like central Wisconsin, are a really good mix of that ag and timber. And while I'm certainly not going and targeting ag fields, like, okay, this has to butt up to a cornfield, I've actually seen grouse out picking in cornfields, which is just an odd sight to me coming from northern Minnesota. So they will utilize it in some cases, but again, that there's so many different food sources, and grouse are in my opinion, very polar opposite to a pheasant. For example, if you find a cornfield on the edge of good cover, they will be using that cornfield to eat. And if there's corn, they are generally going to be eating it. Where grouse, I could shoot 5 grouse in the same area, and I look at their crops, and each one of them are going to be different. So I wouldn't target those cornfields again, like Jack said, like those edges. Yeah, that's important, but I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to target those particular food sources.
Here's I think we'll end on this one. We're over our hour here, but James asked, and this was me a few years ago. Folks without dogs, any suggestions on walking through an area? So
Yes.
the classic, what I'd always been told and what works, and honestly works with a dog too, and works with pheasants as well, is if you get into an area, this takes experience, and I basically learned it from our family hunting land that we've hunted forever, just where we found birds. Maximize your time in those high density areas, or areas where you've seen grouse, or just like this looks grousey, and spend time in there and just stand still for 5 minutes. You walk past a lot of grouse that you never know are there. It's like that wily rooster pheasant, if you're familiar with that. They're going to tuck in some cover, and they might have played this game before, and they're going to let you go by. But if you stop, they'll start to get nervous after a few minutes. And there's a lot of times where, if you're in good cover and you're stopping, wait a couple minutes, just hang out, a bird will flush. Now, it might be tough shooting, of course, because that's the benefit of Ben and I both have pointing dogs. They'll let you know, like, hey, there's a bird here, and it's somewhere off the end of my nose here. But that's my best tip as far as hunting without dogs. Growing up northern Minnesota, I've shot a lot of birds off the edge of, logging roads and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That pace is really important for how you go about, and a lot of those times, yeah, like a pheasant, they're just going to hunker down or they're going to run. I'm going to share the web map one more time here. So like I'm going to find those more manageable pieces of cover for one person without a dog. And honestly, this is a great opportunity for you flushing dog guys to give me hell. Most of the time, I don't see my dogs. They're, 150 yards, 200 yards. So I spend a lot of the time walking alone. My dogs are out hunting. And I have foot flushed a fair amount, but really it's keying in on those areas that are more manageable. For example, you look at this spot here. I can this is a high density, like a high potential density area for grouse. If I go and measure this across, this is 95 yards. So I could zigzag my way through that. Like, I bet there's going to be a bird here, right in this pinch point right here. So I can go and walk along those edges, have the chance for birds to squirt out over this marshy area. Stop. Yep. Like Jack said, stop. I'll stop, kick around, make a sudden jerky movements. Like, if you think about it like a rabbit, if you're sitting in your yard and you're just walking down the road and a rabbit freezes and you keep walking, a lot of the times they'll freeze until you get past and then they'll run away. But all of a sudden, if you stop, like make a quick sudden stop, they're going to lock up, and then you make a quick jerky movement, and a lot of times they go run away. Same thing with grouse. So finding those areas and then those key areas. And honestly, I've spooked a number of grouse when I get into an area where it's like, oh man, there should be one here, and my dogs aren't around. I'll do my little grouse shake. So that's what I got for dogless grouse hunting.
There was a question in here that reminded me of a point I was going to make earlier. But one thing I did a couple years ago, so when you're out hunting, make sure you mark your grouse contacts. I mark almost every one, unless it's in an area where I've previously had it and I already have a waypoint there. But I did this a couple years ago, and just in our at our land in northern Minnesota where we deer hunt and do some grouse hunting. I remember just like pinning the spots where we typically got into grouse. and looking at them and saying, okay, why do we always find grouse here? And then applying that moving forward. So that's something you can do right now. If you have some waypoints of, man, these are areas I found grouse and never really thought about why they're there, go back and look. And, a lot of times it's like Ben showed, we had an area where there's a whole bunch of balsams that border some oaks that are near some aspens. Say, oh, that's why the grouse are there. And then try to find other areas that look like that.
Mhm.
Especially in a localized area like that where it's similar habitat, similar vegetation and terrain. That's kind of what I did a couple of years ago with dusky grouse out in western Montana. I still haven't figured out duskies. Um, Ben knows my struggles this year, but that's my white whale. I want to figure out duskies. They taste as good as a ruffed grouse and they're twice the size. What's not to love? But I'd run into them when I'm elk hunting or when I'm bear hunting. I'd hear them hooting, and then looked at, okay, what do those areas have in common? Why are they there? And then apply that moving forward. And I just told you I've been having struggles with them, but it did help me get into them more consistently than I was previously. So, um, you know, do some of that. That's something you can do right now too, is look at your previous waypoints if you have some, if you're an experienced grouse hunter, and look at how you can apply that to other areas. Well, all right, Ben, thank you for your time. We went over our hour. Any final words for the folks? Any hot tips that you saved for the end?
Oh, I don't know if I have any hot tips, but I can tell you what I am jonesing to get out there. And the best thing you can do is spend time in the woods. Like as I've done it more and more. And again, I said it, I think this will be the third time, but just be very intentional when you flush a grouse. Just stop. You're not in a hurry. Stop, look around. Why are they there? That is going to help you ultimately become a more successful grouse hunter, learning from those contacts. So I hope everyone has a safe and successful season. And if you are running dogs, I hope they learn something and everyone has a good time. So,
Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. If you like classes like this, we are doing a very similar one for pheasants in early October, so stay on the lookout for that one. And all of our other master classes. There is a survey at the end of this class if you wouldn't mind letting us know how we did. And then we do ask if there's any topics you'd like to see, let us know there. That's kind of how we design our schedule, and it helps us provide educational content that's valuable to you. And there's questions in there right now about how to rewatch this. Reminder, we will email you tomorrow evening with a YouTube link so you can rewatch this. So be on the lookout for that. And that was a good Midwestern goodbye, Ben. Took us about 5-10 minutes. Hope everyone has a good evening and a safe season, and see you on the next one. We'll end with that.